Alright then, we're going to start. I've blocked in most of these, the bandages and wraps and stuff, with a darkish brownish black mix, similar to how we had the base coat. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to just gradually add cork to that mix to build up the highlights on all these surfaces. I don't want to go too light here. It's going to be fairly lightish, but not like a white bandage sort of thing. I want to get a sort of slight variation in tone here. I'm sort of trying to just, I'm going to highlight this quite rough. Really not worrying about whether it's smooth, what it's got layer lines, paint lines, that's absolutely fine. In fact, the more the better of things like that, because this is, I want this a bit like other things paint. I just want this to look, you know, worn, rough. It doesn't have to be something that's going to look, you know, or rather wouldn't look sort of pretty and smooth in real life. So we want to try and make sure we don't make it that way. We'll do the rest off camera. Alright then, so I've gone around all those bandages, and you can see I'm keeping them fairly dark because I know I'm going to do the skulls and the fur. I need that bit of contrast there. So what I've done is I've just added, this is almost pure cork this time. I'm just going to add some little highlights in a couple of little places. So this is really all I want from this, is just a few little, almost line highlights, edge highlighting in some of it, very small, just to give, you know, that, it just helps to define shapes. A little bit more. Right, we'll do the rest off camera. Right, so that's all the main bits of light that I've added into these. Like I said, I don't want to go too crazy. But I've just added in a little bit of buff now. And we're just going to do some final little small highlights, maybe some little nicks and cuts just to finish this off. So I'm really trying to just capture some of these upward facing edges, because that's where the biggest impact will be when you're adding these sorts of highlights. And some bits I'll put, like I just did there, a little bit more light. But that's about it really. We'll just do this bottom bit. Right, we'll do the rest off cam. Okay guys, we're going to move on to doing the skulls and bones now. So I'm going to mainly do this with chocolate and a tan yellow. We're just going to build up to that sort of parchment bone sort of colour. So, but we've really got to respect the light source here. So the light is from above, so I'm really going to try and get the placement of light correct. And we'll put a little bit down the sides of these skulls just to get that bit of definition. But in reality, these parts would be dark, because there wouldn't be much light getting down there. So we're just trying to sort of push that light up into that area. And if we've got nice thin paint, we can pretty much blend it as we put it on there. So if our paint's nice and thin, we can actually use that to push the paint up, like I'm doing here, and it creates a nice little transition. Still got a transition line there, so we'll carry on pushing that up. It may take a couple of goes, so this is almost like glazing the transition. And where we see this sort of dark line, we can just keep pushing the paint up into it. And that line is still on that side, so it's going to take a few more layers. And we can reinforce the colour on top. A little bit more solid. That line is pretty much blended in now, and I'll go ahead and do the rest off camera. Okay, so we're going to add another highlight to these bone areas now, and I've just added more buff to the mix. So it's going to go quite light, but not quite whitish light. So some of these areas, like these skulls here, I really don't want to do much more than what I'm doing at the moment, because the light is going to be coming from sort of above. So a lot of these skulls just won't get much light. You may have the other bits on the side here. But I really just want to push some light to the upper areas. And again, to get this sort of smooth, it's just going to take a few layers of just pushing that paint. But other than that, I won't do a lot with the faces or the fronts of these, because they're going to be in shadow, because they're facing down. Alright, we'll do the rest off cam. Okay, for the last highlight, guys, I've just put pure buff on the palette, and I went and blacked in the little tiny crack on the top of the skull. And all I want to do is just add a little highlight, in a couple of places. I may go back, because this line looks a bit thick, and just try and narrow it a bit. And then I'll go back and blend that line in later. And we're just going to go around and just put some very small highlights in a couple of these little other bone parts, and just to give them a little bit more of a pop. And that'll be it for the bone. Right then, guys, we're going to move on to some of the steel bits right now. So I'm going to make quite a dirty steel on this, so I'm going to use blue-grey as the main colour, but I'm going to add some mud brown to it, just to give it this sort of a sort of dirty blue look. It's something I found a little while ago, and I use a lot now, where when I'm doing things like steel, for instance, I don't want it to, especially on a character like this, I don't want it to look too clean. I want this to be this element of dirt in it. And it's not hugely apparent, but I think it does make a little bit of difference. It's certainly something I like to see when I'm doing these sort of metallic, sort of steel or iron type parts. And I just prefer the tone in the straight sort of blue-grey, shiny tone. So there's the first part. So just put a little bit more on. So we just map out where our highlights are roughly going to be. We can put a little bit around the bases of these as well, just to give them that cut-off point, which always helps with these spikes. Right. And we'll do the rest off camera. Okay then guys, for the final sort of highlight on this steel, there's not a lot of it, so it's just little dot highlights really. I'm going to be adding quite a bit of ivory to the mix. What we're going to try and do here, very little paint where we just really want to make the tips. Have that little bit of a shiny look. And like with all things with metallics, you have to really hold back with the brighter colours. It should only be little bits, and that's what gives things the shine. It's just the very small bright highlights. Right, we'll do the rest off camera. Alright guys, and for the last highlight, the one we really want to make this pop, we've got virtually pure ivory on the palette. And we really do, we just want little dots. This is what will add the shine. This is where we've got to be very disciplined and just add these little tiny bright sparkle points on this steel. And as you can see here, I'm really painting so little of it, but it will do enough to add that bit of shine to the steel. Right. And we can also do, you don't have to limit this just to the tips and ends of things. So you can do things along the surface here like I'm doing here. Because there can still be shiny parts even in the, what we might call the shadowy sections. So like on here, for instance, we'll put a little bit of shine there. And on here,